All right, this week we face another double parasha. This will be the third in 4 weeks. We had Tazria Metzorah, we had Aharemot Kedoshim. Last week we took a little bit of a hiatus. We did Parashat Emor. And this week we have Parashiot Behar Bechukotai. They are unique in that each parasha only deals with essentially one topic. Parashat Behar deals with the topic of Shemitah Yovel, which is where our focus will be. And Parashat Bechukotai deals primarily with the reward and punishment for either listening to or violating the Torah. So unique, you don't usually find a parasha that only has one topic in the entire parasha, but that is what we are dealing with this week. And again, I want to reiterate something we mentioned a few weeks ago, and that is that the rabbis in creating the calendar wanted certain parashot to be read at certain times during the year. We want to make sure we read Parashat Bimidbar before Shavuot, and hence we got to get a double parasha in this week so that next Shabbat we can read Bimidbar as we make our way to Shavuot. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, but that is one of the reasons for the double parasha this week. All right, let me share my screen so we can discuss our sources together this week again. All right, this week's topic, In Search of Freedom, begins with a glance at last week's parasha. So I want to go back for a moment to Parashat Emor. If you remember, Parashat Emor, amongst many topics, it was a potpourri of topics in Parashat Emor, and we wove them together last week. But one of the topics was talking about the Chagim, all of the holidays. And in doing so, Parashat Emor talked about this specific time of year, otherwise known as Sefirat HaOmer. We are counting down the days from Pesach to Shavuot, 49 days, 7 full weeks. Day 50 will be Shavuot. And in describing it, the Torah writes as follows in source number 1, and I want you to pay attention to the verbiage because I will ask a question on it after we read source number 2. PASOK says, Usfartem lachem imachorat haShabbat. You should count for yourselves the day after Shabbat. It is not the day after Shabbat. It is not Sunday. Shabbat here is defined as Yom Tov, meaning that you should start counting for yourselves the day after the holiday starts, meaning the second day of Pesach. We start counting the Omer. Miyom aviachem et Omer atenufa, from the day that you bring the Korban HaOmer. Sheva Shabbatot temimot tehiyana, 7 full weeks. Ad mimachorat hashiveri tispuru hamishim yom, until the end of the 7th week, you should count 50 days. V'ikravtem mincha hadasha l'Adonai, at which point you should bring a special korban to Borei Olam. So we count 7 days, 47 weeks, which is 49 days. It mentions here the counting of weeks and the counting of days. Hence, when we count the Omer, we do both, right? So last night was the 34th day, which is 4 weeks and 6 days. That is how Sefirat HaOmer is outlined in terms of counting in last week's parasha, Parashat Emor. This week, we also find the concept of counting. We find the concept of counting 7. It is not the Omer, it is counting the 7 Shemitah cycles that lead up to Yovel. So I'll read the pasuk, we'll translate, and then we'll recap for a moment. It says, V'safarta lecha, you should count for yourself, Sheva Shabbatot Shanim, 7 years. Sheva Shanim, Sheva Paramim, 7 years, 7 times. V'ayu lecha yemei Sheva Shabbatot Hashanim, Tesha v'arba'im shana. And that should be a total of 49 years. So the Jewish agricultural cycle works in cycles of 7. All right, 6 years, just like you have 6 days where you work, the 7th day you rest on Shabbat. 6 days we work the field, we go to work, we produce, we do whatever it is we do. On the 7th year, the land lies dormant. We call that Shemitah. Every 7 Shemitot, every 7 years, every 7 cycles of 7 years, we have what is called Yovel. What happens in Yovel? Says in source number 3, V'kidashtem et shenat chamishim shana ukratem diror ba'aretz l'chol yoshvea. In the 50th year, you should proclaim liberty in the entire nation. Yovel hi tihiya lachem, v'shavtem ish el chuzato v'ish el mishpachto tashuvu. On the 50th year, we have Yovel. So both times, we have a counting of 7. For the Omen, we count every year 7 weeks, 49 days on the 50th day, Shavuot. And on a much larger scale in this week's parasha, 7 years, 7 cycles, 49 years, and the 50th year is Yovel. If we were in person, I would ask you if you could tell me what is the glaring difference between source number 1 and source number 2 as it describes to you how you should count. And I'm sure there would be a myriad of answers. The one I want to focus on this evening is a grammatical one. When it talks about counting the Omen, it says usfartem lachem in the plural. You should count for yourselves. When it talks about counting the Yovel, it says v'safarta lecha, you should count for yourself. Is there anything to learn from this seemingly small nuance in that when we count the Omen, we count and it's in the plural, and when we count the Yovel, we count and it is in the singular. I want to propose, based on the Mifarshim, that there is a very significant difference that tells us an important lesson about what it means to be free, all captured in that very small detail. For that, we need to explore what happens during a Yovel year. So I want to read source number 3 again, and it says, "V'kidashtem et shanata hamishim shana." You should sanctify the 50th year. Ukratem diror ba'aretz lechol yosheveha, and you should proclaim liberty in the land for all of its inhabitants. Yovel hi tihiyeh lachem. It should be a Yovel for you. It's called a Jubilee year. V'shavtem ish el chuzato, and every man should return to his territory. Ve'ish el mishpachto tashuv, and every person should return to his family. Rashi defines for us what it means that each person should return to his territory and to his family, and inasmuch defines what dror, this word liberty, means. And he writes in source number 4, Ukratem dror la'avadim, slaves. Ben nirtza, ben shelo, kalu lo shesh shanim k'mishenim kar. All slaves go free in the Yovel year, whether they're in the 6 years of working for a general slave, right? We know slaves work for 6 years, they go free in the 7th year. A slave is in his 3rd year of work, Yovel comes, he goes free. No questions asked. By the same token, ben nirtza, if I have a slave that was supposed to go free, he worked 6 years, 7th year came, he was supposed to go free. Slave loves his master, he loves his adoptive family, he's happy with his conditions, he doesn't want to go free. His slave master takes him betin, they pierce his ear, they put an earring, and he becomes a slave le'olam, forever. Not really forever. Forever means until Yovel. So he's in his 27th year of slavery, he also goes free. All slaves must go free during the Yovel year. Continues Rashi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Mahu Lashon Dror. What does the word liberty mean? Kim dayar ben dayra v'chule, shedar b'chol makom shehu rotzeh ve'eno b'reshut acharim. Liberty means having the ability to roam the earth as you see and as you please. No strings attached, nobody's over you, you have liberty. If I had to define it, well, let's read the second Rashi first. V'shavtem ish el achuzato, and each person should return to his property, his territory. Says Rashi, shehasadot chozrot leba'alehen, that the fields go back to their ancestral owners. As you know, Israel was split up into portions when the Jewish people conquered it, and every tribe got a portion. If somebody in the tribe of Shimon was poor, and therefore, in order to make money, he had to sell his real estate. So he sells it to somebody from the tribe of Dan. And with that, he makes money to come out of poverty. Once Yovel year comes, the person, the family from Dan, from the tribe of Dan, must return the property to the person from Shimon. Has to go back to its ancestral owner. Everything reverts back. Yovel is the reset button as we declare liberty. What does liberty mean as shown by this Rashi? Dror is liberty. It is the removal of external constraints, physical or otherwise, that impede an individual's personal choice and independent action. It is either conferred upon an individual by an outside force or attained through severance from that force. Liberty means that I have the ability to be a free person. I don't have a master. I'm not bound by anybody's rules. I'm not bound by anybody's limitations. I am free to roam the earth, own property, own land, have money, have a business as I see fit. I am a person who lives with liberty. That is what happens in Yovel. Liberty is not the same as freedom. Freedom has a very different definition. We need to explore what freedom means, and then we could return to our original question. To do that, we go to an unlikely source, and that is back to Sefer Shemot, where we talk about the Luchot and Matan Torah. The PASOK says about the Luchot, the tablets that we got, V'haluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema. The Luchot were carved out by God himself. V'hamichtav michtav Elohim hu, and the writing of the Luchot was God's writing. Charut al haluchot, carved onto the Luchot. So God didn't write it, black ink on a white paper. He carved the words into the stone, and that is what is called charut. It is engraved into the stone. There is a famous Mishnah on that pasuk, which reads as follows: Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, said Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, B'chol yom v'yom bat kol yotzet mehar chorev u'machrezet ve'omeret. Every day, a heavenly voice comes out and says, Oy lahem labiriyot me'elbona shel Torah. Woe unto the people who despise the Torah. Shekomi she'eno osek b'Torah nikra nazuf. Anyone who's not involved in Torah is cast away. Ve'omen, here's the key piece, and it also says, V'haluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema. V'hamichtav michtav Elohim hu charut al haluchot. The Mishnah quotes the pasuk we just read, that God engraved the letters on the luchot. Explain the rabbis, Al tikra harut, do not read the word harut as engraved, ela cherut, but freedom. She'en lecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'talmud Torah. V'chol mi she'osek b'talmud Torah harezeh mit'aleh. There is no person who is free unless they are involved in learning Torah. Freedom is to be engaged with, is to be involved in, is to be passionate about Torah. Because I can't have freedom if I don't have the value of life that the Torah gives me. Freedom is defined in a very distinct way as follows. Cherut, freedom, the injection of positive purpose and value into one's life. The individual who enjoys cherut by choosing to pursue a higher good actively frees himself from servitude to the surrounding world and its potentially enslaving forces. Cherut cannot be granted by another, but must be attained by an individual himself. I need to spell check next time I do this. Cherut, freedom, means attaching myself to a higher value, and that's what Torah gives me. Because slavery can be self-imposed. Because I become a slave to work, I become a slave to my money, I become a slave to my device, I become a slave to a desire. I can have slavery that is self-imposed. The Torah teaches me how to keep my perspective on life so that I do not become enslaved to the vices of life. And so only in being attached to Torah can I find freedom. Without it, I can very easily become enslaved to the world around me, even though I have liberty. A person could have liberty but not freedom, could have freedom but not liberty. I can be free to roam the earth, to own a business, to own a home, to do as I please, but I can still not have freedom because I'm enslaved to something else. I'm enslaved to the bottle. I'm enslaved to the device. I'm enslaved to my work. I'm enslaved to a desire because I have fallen prey to something that the world is distracting me with. So I have liberty. I have been liberated, but I am not free. And at the same time, I can have freedom and not liberty. I can be a slave to somebody else, but in my mind, I can be free. Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he's a survivor of the Holocaust. The first half of the book, he talks about his experiences in Auschwitz. In the second part of the book, he talks about his theory of logotherapy. He went on to become a psychoanalyst. He writes that the people who survived, or the overwhelming percentage of people who survived, are the people who did not let the Nazis take their minds. They owned their bodies, but they never took hold of their minds. And for the 3, 4, 5 years that they spent in the camps, they were free in their heads. And therefore, they were liberated later on. Those people were not liberated all that while, but they were free. And the Torah gives us the vehicle by which we can find freedom, and that is the journey of the Omen. Source number 7 is a famous PASOK, but when people quote it, they forget the last word. Vayomer Adonai Moshe, bo el Paro. Hashem tells Moshe, go to Paro, ve'amartai elav, ko amar Adonai shalach et ami v'ya'avduni. Here is the PASOK. Moses tells Paro, God says, let my people go. Let my people go, and what? Everybody forgets the last word. Shalach et ami v'ya'avduni, and they will worship me. They're not going out just to be liberated physically as human beings who will no longer have slave masters. They're going to worship Borei Olam and find that the Torah gives them the freedom to not just be liberated, but to also be free human beings who have the blueprints to figure out how not to fall prey to the distractions of the world. And it's repeated on the threshold of our Exodus. Hadahu dichtiv, says source number 8, Mishchu ukchu lachem. Moshe tells the Jewish people when he commands them to take a korban, pull, mishchu, pull and take for yourselves a korban. What does that mean, mishchu, pull and take for yourself a korban? What's mishchu? Pull it for yourself. Kilomar, mishchu yidechem avodat kochavim, pull away from the slavery. Ukchu lachem son, and take a sheep. And slaughter the God of the Egyptians and make a korban, and then God will pass over your homes. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them, you need to pull away. We're not just standing on the threshold of liberty, we're also standing on the threshold of freedom, and the two are not the same. Tomorrow, you will be a liberated human being. You will not have a master. But it doesn't mean you won't still be a slave. You need to pull away from the culture. You need to pull away from the avodah zarah. You need to pull away from the state of mind of being a slave. And it took the Jewish people 40 years to make that happen because they had a slave mentality. They were liberated, but they weren't free. They didn't know how to think like free people until they got the Torah, experienced it, lived with it, and saw what it had to offer for a person to be able to find freedom. And hence we return to the original question and find that the nuance is so significant that it defines for us this very idea. When talking about counting the Omer, the PASOK says, Usfartem lachem, and you should count for yourselves, each and every one of you, as we make our journey from Pesach to Shavuot, from liberty that you were given on Pesach to the freedom that will be granted when you get the Torah on Har Sinai on Shavuot. Each of you needs to count it for yourself. It's a personal journey. We all have something that we're enslaved to. And this time of year, we're trying to move away from whatever it is that is enslaving for us. And that is a very personal thing. Each one of you has to count your way out of it. Count your way out of the desire. Count your way away from the bottle. Count your way away from your job. Count your way away from the device. And in a personal fashion, find your freedom through the Torah. And that is a personal journey. As opposed to liberty. V'safarta lecha, count for yourself. One governing body. The Bet Din, as the Gemara says, the Bet Din proclaimed liberty. And as the Bet Din, the governing body of the Jewish people, they were able to declare and say, everyone is a free man, in that everyone now gets to roam the earth. The slaves and the people who are poverty-stricken and the people who lost their ancestral lands, we proclaim all of you free, in that you now have the freedom to do as you please. But that doesn't mean you're free in your state of mind. That you have to find on your own. And so the Torah, in telling us how to count each of these two things, highlighted the nuance in a very small word. In the plural, for counting the Omen, you count for yourself. It's a personal journey. You have to find your own freedom. And by the Yovel, the Bet Din declares liberty and allows everyone to go free. And hence the mitzvah is for the Omen. The Gemara writes, Tana Rabbanan uspartem lachem sheteheh sefira lekol echad be'echad. Everyone has to count. You can't rely on somebody else. Oh, count the Omen for me, and it'll count. It doesn't work. You have to count it for yourself, because you're doing your own journey towards freedom. There's a beautiful piece by Rabbi Yaakov Menken that I copied here at the bottom, and he connects it to the Declaration of Independence. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote that we have rights, such as the famous life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If we view this as an ascension from the most basic right to life to the ultimate, towards which we all strive, which is happiness, if liberty is supposed to make it possible for us to be happy, then the Torah's freedom seems to serve the purpose very well. Those who visit an active, observant Jewish community do not find a restricted, shackled people, but one where sharing, generosity, and happiness are the order of the day. There was actually a Los Angeles Times survey that discovered that residents of religious communities were significantly more likely to describe themselves as happy because they have purpose. They have an instruction book. They have a manual that tells them how not to fall prey to the distractions of life. And in many ways, the rules of the Torah are liberating because they allow us to start not from point 0, but from point 100, because we know what not to fall prey to. It's interesting to note, as a sidebar, that this PASOK in the Torah about Yovel is the PASOK that you find on the Liberty Bell. And it says on the Liberty Bell, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. Problem is, it's only half of the PASOK. If we go back to the PASOK, which is this one, source number 3, they just quoted, Ukratem diror ba'aretz lechol yosheveha. You should proclaim liberty onto the land for all of its inhabitants. They did not continue it. Yovel hi tiyeh lachem. It should be Yovel. V'shavtem ish el achuzato v'ish al mishpachto, and everyone should return to their ancestral lands, and everyone should go free. Part of finding freedom, which is something that the Torah tells us that was either inadvertently or consciously removed from the Liberty Bell, is that if we want true freedom, other than having to obtain it in our own minds, because we can enslave ourselves, is the fact that we have to face our past. The Torah says, if you, slave, want to truly be free, You need to go back to the person that you stole from, that led you into slavery, and you need to make amends. You need to go back to the wife that you left without a home because you were poverty stricken, and you got to make amends. You, person of Shimon, who sold your ancestral land to the person of Dan and gave up on a lineage of hundreds of years of ancestral land because you were poverty stricken, you got to go back and you got to take an accounting for that. Part of finding freedom as we move towards the future is building on the past. I cannot set myself free to move forward if I'm not willing to look back and make amends for, make repentance of, make peace with what is behind me. And the American Constitution and the Liberty Bell left that part out, but that is part of our Torah. And hence we are so connected to the Egypt experience. Almost every mitzvah in the Torah goes because you were slaves in Egypt. Hajj, I was slaves in Egypt. It was 3,000 years ago. But that paved the way for you to understand how to gain true freedom. You have liberty. It's yours. Slavery was over hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago with the Jewish people, and in this country in the 1900s. But it doesn't mean that just because you have liberty, you have freedom. That takes a willingness to look at yourself in the mirror and make amends with your past. And it also means being courageous enough to find it in your own mind to set yourself free of the things that otherwise enslave you. And the greatest way to do so is by finding guidance in the Torah. And that is the journey we find ourselves in right now. Pesach celebrated liberty, and it's done. Shavuot will celebrate freedom. And the question that Borei Olam will ask us as we approach that holiday is, are you using the Torah to help yourself find the state of mind that allows you to be free, because that is the gift that I gave you? Or do you continue to fall prey to the vices of life, in which case the only thing that stands in the way of your own freedom is you? Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.